The pager's shrill beep tore through the quiet of my on-call room, yanking me from a restless half-sleep. Code blue. Trauma Bay 3. Stat. My heart slammed against my ribs as I bolted down the sterile halls of Seattle General, the words echoing like a gunshot in my mind. I'm Dr. Ethan Caldwell, 29, trauma surgeon, and I don't flinch at blood or chaos. But nothing could have prepared me for what waited in that bay. I shoved through the double doors, my team already a blur of motion IV lines, monitors beeping, the sharp tang of antiseptic in the air. Then I saw him, Elliot Harper, my ex, lying broken on the table, his brown curls matted with blood, his face pale but still infuriatingly beautiful, like he'd stepped out of the past to gut me all over again. 3 years ago, he'd looked me in the eyes and said, "I never loved you, Ethan. It was a mistake." Now here he was, his life in my hands. Male, 27. Car accident. Multiple fractures. Suspected internal bleeding. Nurse Carla barked, her voice steady despite the chaos. BP's dropping fast. I froze for a split second, my training warring with the ache in my chest. How do you save someone who shattered you? My hands moved before my brain caught up, snapping into muscle memory. Get me a central line kit and call for Oneg. I ordered, my voice sharper than intended. The room buzzed with urgency, but all I could see was Elliot, his shallow breaths, the way his lashes fluttered against his bruised cheek. We'd met in college. 2 kids too stubborn to admit how much we needed each other. He was an art major, always sketching in the quad, his laugh bright enough to make the world feel less heavy. I was pre-med, all focus and no chill, but he'd tease me into loosening up, dragging me to late-night diners or sneaking us onto rooftops to watch the stars. We were fire and gasoline, burning bright until he walked away, leaving me with nothing but questions and a scar I couldn't stitch shut. Dr. Caldwell. We're losing him. Carla's voice snapped me back. The monitor screamed a warning. His heart rate was tanking. I grabbed the paddles, my hands steady even as my mind spiraled. Clear. The shock jolted his body, but the line stayed flat. I couldn't lose him. Not like this. Again. I shouted, my voice cracking. Another shock. Another agonizing second. Then a faint beep. His heart was back, weak but fighting. I exhaled, my knees threatening to give out. Prep him for surgery, I said, forcing calm I didn't feel. I'm taking him to the OR. Carla hesitated, her eyes flicking to my face. Ethan, you sure? You look. I'm fine. I cut her off. But I wasn't. Every glance at Elliot's face was a knife twisting deeper. Why was he here? Why now? And why did it still hurt so damn much? The OR was my domain, a place where I could control the chaos. But as I scrubbed in, my hands shook. I couldn't afford to falter, not when every second counted. Elliot's scans showed a ruptured spleen and a fractured pelvis. If I didn't move fast, he'd bleed out before I could process what seeing him again meant. The surgery began, a dance of precision and instinct. My team was flawless, but the weight of who was on the table pressed against my chest. I made the first incision, my scalpel steady despite the storm inside me. Blood welled up, bright and accusing, and I worked faster, clamping vessels, searching for the source of the bleed. Every suture was a battle to keep him alive. To prove I could save him even if he'd never wanted me to. Hours blurred into a haze of focus. By the time I closed the final stitch, my scrubs were soaked with sweat, and Elliot was stable for now. I stepped back, letting the team take over, and stumbled into the scrub room. Alone, I sank against the wall, my breath ragged. He was alive. But what came next? I'd saved his body. But the ghost of his words, "I never loved you," still haunted me. Could I face him when he woke up? Did I even want to? The hospital never slept, and neither did my thoughts. I checked his chart obsessively, watching his vitals stabilize. By morning, he was in the ICU, still unconscious but breathing on his own. I stood outside his room, staring through the glass. He looked so small, so fragile. Nothing like the Elliot who'd torn my world apart. I didn't know if I was ready for answers. But I knew one thing: I wasn't walking away this time. Not until I understood why he'd lied about his love. About us. About everything. The ICU was a limbo of beeps and whispers. A place where time stretched thin. I stood by Elliot's bed, his chart heavy in my hands. Each line a reminder of how close he'd come to slipping away. His face, bruised but peaceful, stirred something I thought I'd buried years ago. I wasn't supposed to be here. Hospital policy screamed conflict of interest. But I'd already crossed that line the second I took his case. Dr. Gwyn, my attending, had raised an eyebrow but let it slide, probably because we were short-staffed. Or maybe because she saw the look in my eyes. I didn't care. I needed to be here when he woke up. The first time Elliot opened his eyes. 48 hours post-op. I was charting at the nurse's station. "He's asking for water," a nurse called, and I was at his side before I could think better of it. His gaze was hazy, unfocused, but when it landed on me, his breath hitched. "Ethan." His voice was a rasp, barely audible. "Yeah," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "You're in Seattle, General. You were in an accident." He blinked slowly, like he was piecing together a puzzle. "You saved me." I nodded, my throat tight. "You had a ruptured spleen, fractured pelvis. You're lucky to be alive." He turned his head away, staring at the ceiling. "Lucky," he muttered, the word dripping with something I couldn't name. I wanted to demand answers: why he'd left, why he'd lied, but the monitors reminded me he was still fragile. "Rest," I said instead, stepping back. "I'll check on you later." But I didn't leave. I lingered in the ICU, pretending to review charts while stealing glances at him. He drifted in and out, his face a map of pain and something deeper: regret. Maybe. I hated how much I wanted to know. Over the next few days, Elliot improved. His color returned, and he started talking more, though never about us. He'd ask about his injuries, the weather, anything safe. I kept my answers clipped, professional, but every word felt like a tightrope walk. The staff noticed. Carla cornered me one night, her voice low. "You know him, don't you?" she asked. I didn't answer. She didn't push. By day 5, Elliot was moved to a regular room. I should have handed off his care, but I couldn't. Not when every glance from him felt like a question I wasn't ready to answer. One evening, I found him sketching on a napkin, his hands shaky but deliberate. It was a habit I remembered too well, his way of making sense of the world. "What's that?" I asked, nodding at the napkin. He hesitated, then slid it toward me. It was a rough sketch of the hospital room. But in the corner, a figure stood me, unmistakable, my jaw tight, eyes guarded. "You always saw too much," I said, my voice softer than I meant. He looked away. Maybe I didn't see enough. The air between us crackled, heavy with everything unsaid. I wanted to push, to demand why he'd walked away. But a nurse interrupted, and the moment shattered. That night, I dug into his chart again, looking for clues. The accident report was sparse, single car crash. Late at night, no other vehicles involved. The talk screen was clean, but something felt off. Why was he driving alone at 2 a.m.? Where was he going? I started noticing things I'd missed. His clothes, bagged and bloodied, were expensive tailored, not the thrift store finds he used to wear. His phone, cracked but functional, buzzed with notifications from names I didn't recognize. Whoever Elliot was now, he wasn't the broke artist I'd loved. I couldn't stop myself. I searched his name online, something I'd avoided for years. The results hit like a punch. Elliot Harper, rising star in Seattle's art scene, with gallery shows and glowing reviews. He'd made it, just like he'd always dreamed. But there was no mention of a partner, no trace of the life we'd planned together. The next morning, I walked into his room, determined to get answers. He was sitting up, his sketchbook open, but he closed it when he saw me. "We need to talk," I said, my voice low but firm. His eyes met mine, and for the first time, I saw fear. "Ethan." A knock at the door cut him off. A man stepped in, mid-30s, polished in a way that screamed money. "Elliot." "Thank God," he said, rushing to his side. Elliot's face softened, and my stomach twisted. "Mark," he said, his voice warm in a way it hadn't been with me. Mark barely glanced at me. I came as soon as I heard. I stood there, invisible, as the pieces fell into place. Elliot had moved on, and I was just the idiot who'd saved his life, still chasing a ghost. Mark's presence in Elliot's room was a blade I didn't see coming. He hovered by the bed, all tailored confidence, his hand brushing Elliot's like it belonged there. I stood frozen, my white coat suddenly feeling like armor I didn't know how to wear. "Dr. Caldwell," Elliot said, his voice strained. "This is Mark. My friend." Friend. The word landed like a lie. I nodded curtly, my jaw tight. "I'll check back later," I said, turning to leave before I said something I'd regret. In the hallway, I leaned against the wall, my pulse hammering. Mark wasn't just a friend. The way he looked at Elliot, the ease in their touch, it was everything we'd had. Everything I'd lost. I wanted to hate him, but all I felt was hollow. Back in the on-call room, I couldn't focus. Charts blurred. My mind stuck on Elliot's hesitant eyes. The way he'd said "friend," like he was protecting something. Or someone. I pulled up his chart again, digging deeper. The accident report noted a passenger Jane Doe. Unidentified. Discharged with minor injuries. Who was she? Why wasn't Mark there that night? I needed air. I slipped onto the hospital roof. A place I went when the world felt too heavy. The Seattle skyline glittered, indifferent to my chaos. I remembered nights like this with Elliot, sneaking up to our college dorm roof, his sketches capturing the stars while I rambled about med school. He'd promised we'd build a life together until he didn't. The next day, I caught Elliot alone. He was sketching again, his hands steadier now. I didn't bother with pleasantries. "Who's Mark?" I asked, my voice sharper than I meant. He flinched, setting the pencil down. "He's someone I met after you left me." I finished, the words bitter. "You said you never loved me. Was that true?" His silence was louder than any answer. Finally, he looked up, his eyes wet. "I said what I had to, Ethan. You don't understand." "Then make me," I snapped. "You owe me that much." He shook his head. "It's not that simple. I was drowning back then. You were everything, but I wasn't enough." I wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong, but the pain in his voice stopped me. Instead, I asked about the accident. "Who was in the car with you?" His face closed off. "No one important." "Bullshit," I said, stepping closer. "You almost died, Elliot. I deserve to know why." He looked away, his fingers twisting the hospital blanket. "It was a friend. She's fine. Leave it alone." But I couldn't. Something about the crash, about Mark, about Elliot's evasion sit didn't add up. I started asking around. Discreetly, a nurse mentioned seeing a woman visit Elliot the day after surgery, slipping out before anyone could ask questions. I checked the visitor log. No Jane Doe. No record. That night, I found Mark in the hospital cafeteria, his polished exterior fraying. He was on his phone, voice low but heated. "I told you. It's handled," he said, then hung up when he saw me. "Dr. Caldwell," he said, forcing a smile. "Elliot's doing better. Thanks to you." I didn't smile back. "How long have you known him?" "About 2 years," he said, his tone guarded. "We met at a gallery opening." "You his boyfriend?" The question slipped out, raw and unprofessional. Mark's eyes narrowed, but he didn't answer. "Elliot's complicated," he said finally. "He doesn't let people in easily." "Tell me about it," I muttered, walking away before I pushed too far. Back in Elliot's room, I found him staring out the window, his sketchbook abandoned. "You're digging," he said without looking at me. "Stop." "I need to understand," I said. "You left me, Elliot. You said it was nothing. But now you're here. And I stopped, my voice breaking. He turned, his eyes searching mine. "I didn't want to hurt you. I left because I was scared." "Okay. Scared of what we could have been." The confession hit like a wave, pulling me under. I wanted to reach for him, to bridge the years between us. But Mark's shadow lingered. And so did the mystery of that crash. I wasn't done digging, not yet. The hospital was a maze of secrets, and Elliot was at its center. I couldn't shake the feeling that his accident wasn't random. The Jane Doe, the late-night crash, Mark's cagey demeanor, it all gnawed at me. I was a surgeon, trained to find the source of the bleed. But this wasn't a body I could cut open. I started with the police report, pulling strings through a friend in the department. The details were thin. Elliot's car veered off a quiet road at 2:17 a.m., hitting a guardrail. No skid marks. No signs of another vehicle. The passenger, listed only as female, mid-20s, refused treatment and vanished. The report noted Elliot's disorientation at the scene, but no alcohol or drugs. I confronted him the next morning. He was sitting up, stronger now, his sketchbook filled with fragments of the hospital me hands. The window, the foredrip. Tell me about the crash, I said, keeping my voice even. He didn't look up. I told you, it was an accident. No skid marks. Elliot, you didn't break. What? His pencil stopped. I don't remember. I leaned closer, my patience fraying. You're lying. Who was she? The woman in the car. His eyes flicked to mine, sharp with panic. Drop it, Ethan. Please. But I couldn't. I tracked down the EMT who'd responded to the scene. Over coffee in the hospital cafeteria. She shared what wasn't in the report. Elliot had been frantic. Not about himself, but about the woman. He kept saying, "Make sure she's okay." The EMT recalled, even as he was bleeding out. That night, I found Elliot awake, staring at the ceiling. You protected her, I said. No preamble. The woman in the car. What? He sighed, his shoulders slumping. Her name's Lila. She's a friend. She was scared. Okay. I told her to leave before the cops got there. Why? I pressed. What was she running from? He shook his head. It's not my story to tell. Frustration boiled over. You almost died. Elliot. I deserve to know what's going on. His eyes flashed. You don't get to demand that anymore. You're not mine. The words stung, but I saw the crack in his armor. Guilt. Fear. Something deeper. I softened my voice. I'm not trying to hurt you. I need to understand. He looked away, his fingers tracing the edge of his sketchbook. Lila's in trouble. I was helping her get out of the city. That's all you need to know. It wasn't enough, but it was a start. I left his room, my mind racing. Who was Lila? And what kind of trouble required a midnight escape? I turned to Mark next. I found him in the hospital parking lot, leaning against a sleek black car. We need to talk, I said, blocking his path. He raised an eyebrow. About Lila. The crash. What's Elliot hiding? Mark's face hardened. You're out of your depth, doctor. Let it go. Or what? I shot back. I saved his life. I'm not walking away. He stepped closer, his voice low. Elliot's trying to protect someone. You pushing could get her hurt. Or worse. The threat hung between us. But I didn't back down. If you care about him, you'll tell me the truth. Mark laughed, sharp and bitter. You think you're the only one who cares. I've been here, picking up the pieces you left behind. The accusation hit hard, but I didn't flinch. Then help me keep him safe. He studied me, then shook his head. You're still in love with him, aren't you? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Back inside, I found Elliot asleep. His sketchbook open to a drawing of two hands intertwined mine and his. From a memory I thought he'd erased. For the first time, I wondered if he'd lied about more than just Lila. Maybe he'd never stopped loving me either. The hospital's rhythm never slowed, but my world had narrowed to Elliot and the puzzle he carried. Lila's name was a loose thread, and I couldn't stop pulling. I started with public records, searching for any trace of her. Nothing. No social media. No news articles, just a ghost. I cornered Elliot again. This time in the early morning when the ward was quiet. He was eating breakfast. His movements slow but deliberate. Lila, I said, sitting across from him. Who is she to you? He set down his spoon, his eyes weary. Why can't you let this go? Because you're hiding something, and it's eating you alive. I said. I see it in your sketches. Your face. Tell me. He leaned back, his jaw tight. Lila's my sister. The words hit like a shockwave. Your sister. I repeated, stunned. Elliot had never mentioned a sister in the years we'd been together. Half-sister. He clarified, his voice low. Same dad. Different moms. I didn't know about her until after I left. Why keep her a secret? I asked, trying to piece it together. She's in deep with some bad people, he said. I was trying to get her out. That night, we were running. Running from what? I pressed, my voice softer now. He hesitated, then spilled it. Lila had gotten tangled with a local dealer. Small time but vicious. She tried to leave, but they weren't letting her go. Elliot had been her lifeline, sneaking her out of Seattle to start fresh. The crash wasn't an accident, someone had run them off the road. My blood ran cold. Why didn't you tell the police? They'd kill her, he said, his voice breaking. They still might. I sat back, my mind racing. This wasn't just about Elliot anymore. Lila was out there, alone, and whoever was after her wasn't done. Where is she now? I asked. I don't know, he admitted. She bolted after the crash. I told her to hide. I wanted to shake him for being so reckless, but the fear in his eyes stopped me. We'll find her, I said, not sure how I'd keep that promise. I turned to Mark again, this time with less hostility. I found him in Elliot's room, reading a book while Elliot slept. You knew about Lila, I said, keeping my voice low. He closed the book, his expression guarded. Yeah. Why didn't you tell me? It wasn't my call, he said. Elliot didn't want you involved. Well, I'm involved now, I snapped. Help me find her, or I go to the cops. Mark sighed, rubbing his temples. Lila's scared. Ethan. She's hiding in a safe house. But she won't stay put long. I can get you the address. But you need to be careful. He scribbled a location on a piece of paper, an old motel on the edge of the city. I didn't trust him fully, but it was a start. I left the hospital that night. My scrubs swapped for jeans and a hoodie, the address burning a hole in my pocket. The motel was a rundown relic. its neon sign flickering in the rain. Room 12 was dark. But I knocked anyway. No answer. I was about to leave when the door cracked open, revealing a woman with Elliot's eyes sharp. Haunted, but defiant. "Lila," I said. "Who the hell are you?" she demanded, her hand on the doorframe. "I'm Ethan, Elliot's friend. He's in the hospital because of you." Her face crumpled, and she let me in. The room smelled of stale coffee and fear. "I didn't mean for this," she said, pacing. "I told him to stay out of it." "Then tell me everything," I said. "Because I'm not letting him die for you." Lila's story poured out drugs, debts, a dealer named Vince who didn't take kindly to betrayal. She tried to run, but Vince's crew found them. The crash was a warning. I gave her my number, told her to stay put, and promised to keep Elliot safe. But as I drove back to the hospital, I knew safe was a lie. Not when love and danger were this tangled. The city felt sharper now, every shadow a threat. Lila's story had cracked open a world I didn't belong in, but I was in too deep to turn back. Elliot was still in the hospital, his recovery steady but his secrets heavier than ever. I couldn't look at him without seeing Lila's fear, without feeling the weight of his choice to protect her over himself. Back at the hospital, I found him awake, sketching again. This time, it was a portrait. Younger, laughing under a streetlight. The memory hit hard, our first date. Rain-soaked and reckless. When he'd kissed me like the world could wait. "You saw her," he said, not looking up. I didn't deny it. "Lila's safe. For now. But you need to tell me everything. Elliot. No more lies." He set the sketchbook down, his hands trembling. "I wanted to keep you out of this. You were always good. I didn't want to drag you into my mess." "Your mess," I said, my voice rising. "You almost died, and I'm the one stitching you back together. I'm already in it." He looked at me then, his eyes raw. "I left you because I was scared, Ethan. Scared of how much I loved you, how much I'd ruin you. When I found Lila, it was like a chance to fix something, to be better." His words tore at me, but I couldn't let them sink in. "Not yet. Vince," I said. "Who is he? How do we stop him?" Elliot's face darkened. "He's a dealer with too much power and not enough mercy. Lila owed him money, big money. I was helping her pay it off. But she wanted out. That's why we were running." I sat down, my mind racing. "We need to go to the police." "No," he said sharply. "Vince has people everywhere. Cops won't help." "Then what?" I asked, frustration bleeding through. "We just wait for him to come after you again. After Lila." Elliot reached for my hand, his touch tentative. "I don't know. But I'm sorry, Ethan. For everything." His fingers were warm, familiar, and for a moment, I let myself feel the pull that had always been there. But I pulled back. "I can't do this," I said. "Not until we're safe." I left his room, my heart pounding. Mark was waiting in the hallway, his arms crossed. "You found her," he said. Not a question. "Yeah," I said. "And now I need your help. We need to end this." Mark studied me, then nodded. I know someone who can get to Vince. But it's risky. Riskier than doing nothing. I shot back. He didn't answer. Just handed me a burner phone. Wait for my call. And don't tell Elliot. The next few days were a blur of tension. I checked on Lila, who was still at the motel. Her fear palpable but her resolve stronger. I kept my distance from Elliot, afraid my feelings would cloud my judgment. But every night, I'd find myself at his bedside, watching him sleep, wondering if we could ever rebuild what we'd lost. Mark's call came late on a Tuesday. Meet me at the docks. Midnight, he said. Bring cash. 10 grand. I didn't ask questions. I emptied my savings, drove to the docks, and found Mark waiting by a rusted warehouse. A man stepped out of the shadows, lean, scarred, with eyes that saw too much. Vince's guy, Mark whispered. He'll get Lila off the hook. For a price. I handed over the cash, my stomach churning. The man counted it, nodded, and disappeared. It's done, Mark said. Lila's free. But as I drove back, doubt crept in. Had I just bought a lie? And what would Elliot say when he found out I'd gone behind his back? The hospital felt like a cage. Every beep and shuffle a reminder of the stakes. I hadn't told Elliot about the deal at the docks. I couldn't not until I knew it had worked. Lila was still at the motel, laying low, but her texts were short. Paranoid. I'm safe. Don't come back. Elliot was stronger now, walking short distances with a physical therapist. His sketches had shifted less of me, more of Lila, her face shadowed but unmistakable. He was protecting her, even on paper. I caught him alone one afternoon, his room quiet except for the hum of the monitor. You're leaving soon, I said, checking his chart. Discharge in a couple days, if you keep improving. He nodded, his eyes distant. What then, Ethan? The question hung heavy. You tell me, I said. You're the one with secrets. He flinched, then reached for my hand. This time, I didn't pull away. I never stopped loving you, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I left because I thought you deserved better. Someone who wasn't broken. I wanted to believe him, but the years of hurt held me back. You don't get to decide that for me, I said. You broke me, too. His grip tightened. I know, and I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you, if you let me. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. A text from Mark. Vince knows. Get to Lila. Now. My blood froze. I bolted from the room, ignoring Elliot's confused call. The motel was 20 minutes away, but I made it in 12, my heart pounding. The door to room 12 was ajar. The room empty. Lila was gone. I called Mark, my voice shaking. Where is she? They took her, he said, his voice tight. Vince's guys. The deal fell through. I cursed, slamming my fist against the wall. I trusted Mark, trusted the plan. And now Lila was paying the price. I drove back to the hospital, my mind a storm of guilt and fear. Elliot was waiting, his face pale. What's wrong? He demanded. I told him everything: the docs, the cash, Lila's disappearance. His eyes blazed. You went behind my back. I was trying to save her. I shouted. To save you. He stood, wincing but defiant. You don't get it, Ethan. She's all I have left. Then help me find her, I said, my voice breaking. Please. He hesitated, then nodded. We spent the night piecing together what we knew: Vince's haunts, his crew, Lila's last movements. Mark joined us, his guilt palpable but his knowledge crucial. He gave us a lead, a warehouse on the outskirts of town, where Vince ran his deals. We didn't have time for a plan. At dawn, we drove to the warehouse. Just the three of us: me, Elliot, and Mark. It was reckless, but I couldn't lose him again. Not to Vince. Not to anyone. The warehouse was a fortress of rust and shadow. We slipped inside, the air thick with dust and danger. Lila was there, tied to a chair, her face bruised but fierce. Vince stood nearby, his smile cold. You must be the doctor, he said, eyeing me. You're in over your head. Maybe, I said, stepping forward. But I'm not leaving without her. Elliot grabbed my arm, his voice low. Ethan, don't. But I was done running. For Lila, for Elliot, for the love I'd never let go. I was ready to fight. The warehouse reeked of oil and fear, its dim light casting jagged shadows. Lila's eyes met mine, fierce despite the bruises. Vince's smirk was a challenge, his men circling like wolves. Elliot stood beside me, his breath uneven, still weak from surgery but unyielding. Mark lingered behind, his face taut with guilt. Let her go, I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline. Vince laughed, low and cruel. You think you can walk in here and make demands? You're a doctor, not a hero. Maybe I'm both, I shot back, stepping closer. Elliot grabbed my arm, his grip tight. Ethan, stop. We need to be smart. But smart wasn't an option, not with Lila's life on the line. Not with Elliot's heart breaking beside me. I scanned the room, spotting a fire alarm on the far wall. A distraction. Maybe our only shot. Mark, I muttered, barely moving my lips. The alarm. He nodded, slipping into the shadows. Vince's eyes narrowed, sensing the shift. You're out of moves, he said, pulling a knife from his belt. My heart pounded, but I held his gaze. You don't want this fight. Let her go. And we walk away. He stepped closer, the knife glinting. You don't get it, do you? Lila's mine until her debt's paid. Before I could respond, a piercing wail shattered the silence. Mark had hit the alarm. Vince's men flinched, and I lunged, tackling him to the ground. The knife skidded across the floor as we grappled, my training no match for his raw strength. Elliot dove for Lila, fumbling with her restraints. Go, she hissed, but he wouldn't leave her. Mark fought off one of Vince's men, his punches wild but effective. I pinned Vince long enough to land a blow, but he was stronger, flipping me onto my back. His fist connected with my jaw, pain exploding in my skull. Then a blur. Elliot slammed a crate into Vince's head, knocking him out cold. Ethan, he shouted, pulling me up. Lila was free, her wrists raw but her eyes blazing. We ran, Mark covering us as Vince's men scrambled. The fire alarm's wail masked our escape, and we piled into my car, peeling out as sirens wailed in the distance. At the hospital, I treated Lila's injuries, my hands shaking from adrenaline and relief. She was bruised but alive, her gratitude silent but fierce. Elliot sat beside her, his hand in hers, his eyes never leaving me. Later, in the quiet of his room, he spoke. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," I said, my voice raw. "For you. For us." He stepped closer, his hand brushing my cheek. "I never stopped loving you, Ethan. I was a coward, but I'm here now." I kissed him, slow and fierce, the years of pain melting into something new hope. Fragile but real. Lila was safe. Vince was in custody. And for the first time, we had a chance. Months later, Elliot moved back to Seattle. He opened a small gallery, his art a testament to survival. Lila started over, free from her past. And me, I learned to love again, scars and all. Because sometimes, the heart you save is your own.